The Indiana General Assembly returns to the State House January 8th. Bill filing deadlines follow on Tuesday and Thursday in the Senate and the House. Plus, a joint session takes place Tuesday night when Governor Eric Holcomb delivers his final State of the State address. But what lies ahead legislatively for Indiana lawmakers? We'll discuss that question with our guests on this edition of PrimeTime. And good evening, I'm Bruce Haines. With us today are Mike Wolf. He is Chair and Professor of Political Science and Acting Director of the Mike Downs Center for Indiana Politics at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. Fred McKissack is with us. He's Editorial Page Editor at the Journal Gazette. And joining us too, Mitch Harper, local attorney and former state representative. And we're glad you're here too. We welcome you to the broadcast. And as we widen out, we say hello to everybody from my right on down. There's Fred, Mike, Mitch. Happy New Year, gentlemen.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, and Happy New Year to you at home as well. And with the new year and the general election that's coming, following up on landmark legislation that has been passed by the legislature in recent years, GOP House Speaker Todd Huston said Republican leadership thought it would introduce fewer priority bills this session to signal that they're in kind of a less is more opinion right now. Many other lawmakers in the region have been discussing this as they'd like a quiet session. So let me ask each of you, what kind of session are we going to have? Fred?
Well, I mean, probably one of my favorite German phrases is Sturm und Drang, right? Storm and stress. And we've had that a lot, both as a state and as a country, pretty much as a world. So I was happy to hear that. Last session, there were, 1,100 bills filed. And I think so far by this morning, I think 277. So it has the potential to be a more quiet session. However, there are a couple of bills, SB 32, which would essentially strip the libraries of their ability to act as a taxing unit, and therefore pushing everything to county government or municipal governments. That doesn't seem like a very quiet way for this session. But I mean, there are also some pretty smart ideas out there as well. So,
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I think normally agenda setting for political scientists is the big thing, and you think there's nothing like a budget to set the agenda. And this year, since we don't have a full-out budgeted year, there's fewer things on the agenda. But I do think there's some things that can find their way in, certainly. There's been some things, certainly, on the Organization Day events that were around town about childcare and some of the other real, important things, some more health things. But I think the leadership has also said, look, we passed so much last year, as you noted, that we have to give it some time to see how the policies that are implemented actually work out. So I think that we probably will see somewhat of a quiet year, relatively. But it is also an election year. And some of the cultural issues, some of the issues that we might see in other states with professionalized legislatures that meet all the way year-round, they might have some innovations that get adopted, as the session moves on as well.
Yeah, Mitch, what do you see?
Oh, I think Mike covered it well. It's an election year, and it's sort of a double election year for legislators because all of the House members are going to be up for election, half the Senate, but it's a new gubernatorial term. It's an open seat. No one knows who's going to win, at least on the Republican side, the nomination. They're going to try to avoid controversy. And not only some of the other things, I mean, we've just had budget numbers released, but interestingly, there certainly were a lot of legislators with the water diversion project to Boone County over in Lafayette and the Wabash Valley. I think there was going to be quite a bit of legislation introduced. There was going to be legislation introduced looking at kind of the opaque quality of the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. You've got two former heads of the IEDC running for governor. They've announced sort of a truce to kick it to this fall when the study's done. Well, guess when that study's probably going to be done? It will be post-November election day.
Yeah.
They want to avoid that hot topic.
Yeah. How about that idea, too, that with the election that there may be a desire among some current seated lawmakers to try to get themselves some additional editorial coverage, on a matter, anything to be sure to cross the finish line in November. Not necessarily wrong, but it is maybe. If it all fits, you wear it. But let me start with you on that one. You've probably seen that somewhere before.
Well, unfortunately, from my time in the General Assembly to now, we see both on the congressional level and increasingly on the state levels that some legislators seem to engage in performance art. It's controversy for controversy's sake. The two parties, their bases have gotten more distilled. And that's led some folks to play to their respective base. I disagree with it wholeheartedly, but yeah, I think you'll see a few members, some of the ones that have gained some notoriety in recent years, they'll be back.
Yeah. And they're always the workhorse, show horse division. These people are facing primaries, and if they have a primary opponent who's a cultural warrior on either side, that, making a name for yourself by getting behind and co-sponsoring something that might be, or even as we mentioned, the home rule. What can Indianapolis control locally, whether it's the Boone County and Tippecanoe situation, or what prosecutors can do in a liberal city or so-called liberal city. There's a lot of potential areas for people to get some free media and make sure that they're moving up the chain as well, now that there's a few open seats around the state. So we'll see.
I know this is a shorter session, supposed to be non-budgetary, and yet nevertheless, it is still one that puts a spotlight on some rather big topics without necessarily a lot of private time to contemplate. But what do you see as some of the one or two top issues on your list that you've either heard the legislature is wanting to take on, or that maybe we'll save this as the part B question, what you think the legislature should take on, but what do you hear is on the to-do list?
Well, in tomorrow's paper, the Journal Gazette, my co-writer has done a really good piece on some of the things that are coming up in the legislature this term. Jeff Kobyleski, he was in Kokomo for a number of years and just lived in Indiana, IU graduate, and has lots of good contacts. And I think one of the pieces that I really thought was very interesting was from somebody that I wouldn't normally side with personally, politically, but Andy Zay's got a great idea about allowing expectant parents to claim an income tax exemption worth $2,500. Now, I know the leaders have said we don't really want to talk about money, budgetary issues, but it's a great idea because we have one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. And if we could get families, women, husbands, to go in and talk to a doctor and really get in on prenatal care, we can help really drive that number down. And it's one of those things that, again, I don't know too many people who would look at that and say, well, let's not do that, or let's not discuss it. So I think it should get some sort of discussion. At least I hope it does.
Mike,
I like child care. I think that's certainly been a big thing that the chamber put forward. And we're coming out of COVID, where there was a lot of federal funding to help these kind of matters. With inflation and the cost of child care and the inability to pay these specialists as much money as they deserve, I think it could be a critical problem, particularly for the economic growth, the ability to provide the up-and-coming people, ability to have. So it's certainly been noted around the state as an important need. Something I wish, my own interest is higher education. That's usually not been on the primary list when we talk about education. K through 12 typically wins out, but I'd like a focus on that. I doubt that will happen, though, obviously, this year.
Mitch, what about you, sir?
I think things may calm down a little bit once they move past a primary election filing in February, and things will be a little more settled. But they're dealing with a lower revenue forecast. The revelation that there's a structural problem with Medicaid. Now, they announced a very large number the other day, But this is through 2025. I've talked to legislators who indicate that that can be massaged through this budget cycle. But if they don't do something about Medicaid, those costs are now baked in. They've got to do something to rein in the costs, or it will be an ongoing problem for years to come. The offset to that may be Indiana has made great strides in paying down the pre-1996 teachers' retirement debt. I mean, they've committed $1 billion a year for several years to do that. Since 1996, teachers' pensions have been fully funded. They're getting close to the finish line, and that will open up in a few years kind of a big amount of additional cash for the state.
Is work on this on the Medicaid side something that could proceed in a short session? Usually the idea the budget doesn't get touched, fiscal things get deferred, or is this a more natural two-part process where you introduce the concept? Ed Sharpino on childcare was talking about introducing additional measures to increase staffing, increase contributions for families to be able to participate in the childcare system, fund pre-K even for that matter, but you introduce the nugget and then you turn in the math 12 months from now.
And I think they have to wait to see who will be helming the new administration and what they will permit. So I think you're right. There's going to be they're going to be kneading the dough. I don't want to use the word dough, but this session they'll bake it in the long session.
There we go. There was a session held out. The Greater Fort Wayne brought the lawmakers together late in November for a post-organization day pre-session sense of what was going to lie ahead. And I was fascinated by the conversation regarding the need to convert US 30 from a highway to a freeway. Up to this point, and this had started back in 2022 with INDOT establishing Propel to look at US 30 and look at US 31, we're now in sort of the final public response phase, feedback phase. But I would throw this out to each of you as to what you have heard on this point and why is that seen as an important item to not forget, and for that matter, to call the future governor in to bully pulpit it back to the legislative branch. Fred?
We've done, again, my coworker, Jeff Kovalevsky, actually has done a couple of pieces about that. And clearly creating that quick route between, northeast Indiana to Chicago. Mm-hmm. Also, what do you have bisecting it, which would be the road from South Bend down to Indianapolis? It makes sense. And I think we've all taken 30. It is a nightmare. I would really welcome that addition. It would link us faster to Warsaw and Fort Wayne. It makes sense, but again, who's going to buckle down and say, "Yeah, let's just do this"? Because clearly, it's going to be an expensive project. Mm-hmm. But will it be a worthwhile project over time? I think yes.
In the evolution of infrastructure?
Yeah, no, I think it's a vital one, and I know people on one of our graduates is the partnership, and he, an alumni event, he was talking about this important. Look, the medical device industry connecting to Chicago, everything Fred was saying. Not only that, it's a dangerous road, mm-hmm. and it's just time. If you've seen what happened with 24 mm-hmm. and the magic to Ohio and to over to the west side of the state, I think it's time. And but it does matter what the candidates that are running for governor, who will be the champion of that and kind of take it over, as well as the local legislative leaders here really need to put that one out there. Mm-hmm.
My concern is safety. I'm a former EMT. We covered all of US 24 and two-lane 24 and two-lane 30 to the Ohio line. I've stood at the scene of many terrific high-speed auto accidents. And so US 30 became reality. And then I organized the first cross-state meeting, and we named the Fort to Port system Now, it took decades for that to be done. It really took Mitch Daniels and the toll road lease to free up the money to do that, even as Ohio and compliments to Mark Souder, to Jill Long for keeping that project going on the federal level. But 30 is dangerous. You have a lot of grade crossing intersections. It'll immediately save lives as they continue to improve it.
Which is interesting because we were talking about the Fort to Port. My wife teaches at Defiance College. She's on tenure track there. And, you know, it's a 50-minute drive. It's a very simple drive for her to take. And she's listened to a lot of books and great music. But one of the things that we've talked about is it is so much more safer for her to drive in this, even in the winter, than what it was when we moved here 19 years ago. So
I can't begin to tell you.
Yeah, and having read so many accidents on that road, I could see, there are just times when you go, yes, it's going to be expensive, but it's so much worth it in the long run. You have to think long term.
Yeah, and at Sweetwater.
Yeah.
And Amazon.
Amazon, right.
You know, it's a needed thing for sure.
Both Senate and House
So do we get
leadership.
to vote?
It truly is before us, and go to your favorite search engine and type in US 30 expansion, or frankly, there's an NDOT site called propel.com that will fill in some gaps there, and it helped flatten my learning curve, but there's a lot more out there to happen. House and Senate leadership also say, by the way, we would like to still see something take place about improving literacy and education outcomes following significant setbacks from the pandemic. There's concern about the grade 3 reading level and truancy related to that, insofar as you have to be in school to learn how to read, and our truancy rates are higher than before the pandemic. What's your take on that?
I mean, the truancy thing, one of the complications is, you know, does the Department of Education, who do you get the sheriff and the prosecutors who are busy, you are already worried about school safety. How do we get that integrated? And that's going to be the secret sauce of how you create a policy that you can have buy-in at the local level to not overly, put too much pressure on local, law enforcement and local prosecutors. But clearly, I mean, this was, again, one of the things that ranked through on the organization day events was the need for the truancy. And also, do you test and do you hold back, somebody in third grade that can't read? And that's a tough thing to do, too. We've always struggled with this as well.
And what to do about the class size that expands as a result of it?
That's what we've talked about is, okay, it's going to cost. Class sizes are going to increase. It sounds good on paper. It reads well on paper. But it has to be more thoughtful. And this is when I want our legislators to be thoughtful and not turn this into a referendum on public education in the same way that we've done in public education in this state. We wrote about graduation rates for 2023. What was it? East Allen University had 100%. Snyder was next. Both Wayne and Northrop had some of the highest graduation rates in Northeast Indiana. Public education here, particularly Fort Wayne Community Schools, is really good. So if we have a really good conversation, listen to what educators are talking about, listen to the analysis, and come up with a thoughtful ideas to help, that would be great. I just don't want this to end up, social and cultural warrior nonsense that has plagued us for years.
Let me ask each of you, and Mitch, let me start with you, sir. Aspirations for the short session. If lawmakers were in studio with us and you had a moment to coach them or encourage them on certain points that maybe have not been in the comment reportage, what would you suggest that these next 10 weeks be about?
They've got a very narrow window and interesting numbers on what's been filed so far. I'm sure there are a lot of legislators. I've been in that position. You're hoping the LSA attorneys get the bill drafts done so you can file them. on time. But I suspect pretty much for the two majority caucuses that the leadership said hold down. They may have actually given them a number of what they should be limited to, because you'll find your other bills are going to be dead on arrival. So I would urge the legislators concentrate on the committees that they're on, dig deeply into what is filed before them and what the committee chair has decided to bring before the committee, deal and make yourself a subject matter expert. They're going to have new legislators coming in, they're going to have a new administration, and for a lot of those legislators, they're the point of continuity on some of these matters of public policy when there are going to be a lot of new people coming into various of the administrative positions.
Yeah. Mike, how about
Yeah, I
you?
agree with that entirely, and I'd like to see a repair of the legislative executive branch. But you know, we've had a rough few years after COVID, and some differences with the attorney general and the governor and the legislative branch. I'd like to see that cool down a little bit, and so that we can kind of move forward a little more smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with what's been said here. Particularly, like you said, cooling it down. As we look forward to the governor's race, which is coming up, and one of the things I thought we were going to bring up at least was Suzanne Crouch's getting rid of income tax. I wondered how much of this is going to be talked about, baked in to some of the ideas in this session. But yeah, as long as we can cool it down and not constantly have this, this animus that doesn't really need to be there, I don't think. Especially when you talk to politicians one-on-one on the phone. Politics, it has its drama there. It has its theatrical moments. But when you talk to these people one-on-one, they're not, it's completely different. And I would like to see that face, the more thoughtful face, put on.
Speaking of drama, next Tuesday night, Governor Holcomb's final State of the State address. What would you like to hear, or what would you expect to hear from the governor? He had success in the past session, particularly with an initiative to bring more health care funding to area counties. That was one of several. Will there be a continuation of that or something new? Mitch, there's going to be, I think, a reveal of a kind on Monday, and then he has the full-throated delivery, 7 o'clock, which you can watch on PBS Fort Wayne, by the way, on our 39.4. That's PBS Fort Wayne Explorer, 7 o'clock Tuesday. From promo back to program, what do you think?
Well, one of the things that's I think would be popularly received, and I know it's something that interests Governor Holcomb, would be for him to lay out somewhat of a program about natural resources, about state parks, about state forests, about what local communities can do for preserves and the building of trails and historic preservation. I think he could hit one for the fences, and it's one for saving things for posterity. And as he's contemplating his final term, I think that's an appropriate topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think I agree entirely. Last year, one of the important things he did was talk about that people move to your state, not just for economic development and the speed at which, but for quality of life. Mm-hmm. And I think that if he hits that tone again, it'll be very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I think Mitch really nailed it on that one. Particularly the idea of saving the natural resources of a state that I think if you've lived here long enough, you realize just how beautiful it is. I think the governor can hold his head up and say, look, we've got plenty of money in the bank. I thought his leadership during the pandemic was, nothing short of incredible. So I think he can walk out with his head up, mm-hmm. and leave a legacy.
In a final minute that we have, what's the over-under on keeping the short session short? Some lawmakers believe this could have a March 8th finish as opposed to a March 14th or 15th wrap up, 14th, I believe. Will we have get in, get out, and get on with it? So what's your take? Again, each of you gets 15 seconds.
So when's the grade 8 for the the NCAA tournament, sometime in the middle of maybe somewhere around there. I would be surprised if this went into April. I really would be.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's going to be done soon. It depends on how, the external races, the gubernatorial race and the presidential race, if anything heats up, a culture war thing gets thrown in there like a grenade.
Yeah.
You get to break the tie.
I think it'll be over early as well. They're going to be seen as keeping their promise, but they're not facing they're facing some fiscal decisions, but not a fiscal crisis, and I think that should allow them to exit early.
And you can take that guidance from a former state representative, Mitch Harper. Thank you so much, sir. A local attorney joining us along with Mike Wolf, who is acting director of the Mike Down Center for Indiana Politics and Political Science Department at Purdue Fort Wayne. Brett McKissack with the Journal Gazette. Read the editorials. And join us back next week when Representative of Dave Abbott and Senator Andy Zay will join us right here as our legislative coverage gets underway on Primetime. For all of us with the program, I'm Bruce Haines. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Good night. The preceding program on PBS Fort Wayne was made possible in part by
Businesses constantly evolve. The Rogers Company started as Rogers Markets in 1944. Today, the Rogers Company is commercial property and real estate development and a proud supporter of PBS Fort Wayne.
Lincolnshire Place. Memory care residential living with a focus on Alzheimer's and dementia. On Diebold Road, north of DuPont. Information and details at lincolnshireplace.us.